Hey, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, whichever part of the world you are coming and joining us for this session today. I wanted to start with just welcoming you to today's session, and I hope that you find this as exciting and fun as I have had quick chats with all the panelists, and it's been so eye-opening for me, and I hope that it is equally for you. I'm Ruhi Ghosh. I'm the moderator for today's session, and I would like to introduce you to our panelists today for this session. It's a great privilege to introduce our first panelist, Yatindra Joshi. At a time when much of manuscript editing is being reframed as automatable, Yatendra represents the kind of expertise that resists that simplification. He's one of the 40 editors globally to be recognized as a distinguished editor by the Board of Editors in the Life Sciences, a recognition of not just technical skill but really deep editorial judgment. And what's particularly interesting about his journey is that he began as a scientist working with the Indian Council of Agricultural Research before moving on into editorial and training roles. And I think that grounding shows up clearly in his work because his editing is not just about language but also about meaning, accuracy, and intent. Over the years, he's edited more than 700 research papers and 30 books and trained researchers across leading institutions, including the Indian Institute of Science and the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, as well as internationally. But perhaps most importantly for today's conversation, Yatendra's work makes visible what is often invisible in editing. That's judgment, discipline specific nuance, ethical awareness, and the ability to engage with a manuscript as a piece of research, not just a piece of text. Welcome Yatendra to today's session. Looking forward to the conversation today. The next panelist I would like to introduce is Susanna. Susanna is the Associate Director of Editing and Publication Support Services at Editage. And she brings over a decade of experience working at the heart of the scholarly publication ecosystem. With a background in biotechnology and more than 12 years in publishing, Susanna's work sits at a critical intersection where research integrity, author support, and evolving technologies like AI all just merge. She's worked closely with a wide range of stakeholders, including researchers, universities, journals, societies, and publishers, giving her a uniquely holistic view of how the system operates and where it struggles. And what stands out is her focus on connecting researchers with the support that they need, connecting stakeholders across the ecosystem, and increasingly connecting human expertise with the responsible use of AI. So, really looking forward to today's discussion, Susanna. I would also like to introduce you to Rafaela. Rafaela is principal investigator at Nova Medical School in Lisbon, Portugal, and brings to this conversation a perspective that is both deeply academic and profoundly international. Her career spans multiple dimensions of the scholarly ecosystem as a researcher, peer reviewer, editor, lecturer, and scientific advisor. She has been associated with several leading international medical journals, contributing not only to the evaluation of research, but to shaping the standards and rigor that underpin scientific communication today. What stands out about Rafaela's work is the breadth of her engagement with research culture itself. So, alongside her editorial and advisory role, she's taught across numerous national, international PhD and master's programs, worked closely with emerging researchers, and really helped them navigate the complexities of academia and publication. So, I'm really looking forward to the insights that three of our incredible panelists have to share today. So, at any point, if there are any questions, please feel free to share them, and we will take all the questions at the end of today's session. My first question today is going to be directed at Yatendra. So, Yatendra, if you would like to just begin by, editors often say that they improve a paper, but what does meaningful improvement, according to you, actually look like?
Oh, thank you, Ruhi. I would say, especially in the days of AI, the value that editors bring is improving the readability, making the text more reader friendly, more readable, more concise. The more mechanical aspects of copy editing, ensuring consistency, ensuring a good match between citations and references at the end, compliance to journal style. Increasingly, that's being taken over by tools that are pretty good at their job. What they cannot do, and that's at least my feeling, is that they can't bring this understanding of the text, because unless you have that, you can't take liberties with the text. And that is why editors, human editors, serve both the author and the reader by making the text more readable. I think that is the unique contribution that human editors bring to the table.
Thanks for that, Yatendra. So since we're on the topic of understanding, what contribution human editors bring to the table, I would like to direct the next question to Susanna. In terms of the metrics that your clients, as per you, what do you think they actually care about today? Is it readability? Is it speed, acceptance rates, compliance, reviewer response? What is it that you think that your clients like truly care about?
Yeah. Thanks, Ruhi. So I think previously there was this focus on, hey, the more you publish, the further you progress. However, in recent times, especially because, now integrity has become such a big issue, it's not so much about the volume, but it's about quality and highlighting that quality. So I think for a lot of our authors, especially when they come to us and they say, hey, we need support, they're not looking at just granular things like, hey, readability. They come to us to be like, please help me highlight the impact that my research is creating. Whether that involves improving readability, that's a consequence of that. But it's also sometimes about, just restructuring, making it more logical, right? Because sometimes you can lose you're just focusing on, like, you have all this information, you don't know what to include in that. So also cutting out the noise is also something that becomes very important as an editor and supporting authors. And like I mentioned, integrity, especially, and I know we might be talking about this a little later with AI, etc. Some of these issues become a little more convoluted, and a lot of authors don't know, am I doing the right thing or am I not? Hey, I've used AI to translate XYZ things. Is that okay? So I think what they come to us is also for guidance, not just in terms of, hey, can you just make my manuscript more impactful, but also come to us to be trusted advisors. So I think that's how I think the role of the editor, the human expertise, has also evolved over time. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think given this evolution that you just spoke about, it brings me to wonder, and Rafaela, if you could take this up, in terms of which aspects of editing are easiest to quantify and which are most valuable but hardest to measure, especially in today's time with so much evolving, like Susanna said. So which do you think would be most valuable but hardest to measure?
So thank you for this question and for the opportunity to participate in this amazing discussion. So indeed, this is a very important question because the aspects that are easy to quantify are those that are more related to operational and output driven of the journal. That indeed Susanna kindly mentioned in her response. But those indeed are creating numbers, right? And allow therefore journals to benchmark or to create more visibility, objectivity, credibility, etc. However, the aspect of editing that generate the greatest impacts are those that resist to this kind of measurement because it's part of an intellectual selection. because it means, for instance, how editors can identify the work that changes the field even before the community might recognize the importance, or how editor create impact not simply by deciding what get published, but how they can shape and frame the discoveries and contextualize them and scrutinize them. And these pass through a transformative science, right? That goes beyond the citation that the journal might occur. It might also involve how they can select reviewers that improve rather than evaluate a manuscript, and how they can indeed identify an interdisciplinary work that initially might appear risky or unconventional, but that then can bring the building up of a research community around that specific topic. So editorial excellence indeed is what impact the most, but is also the most difficult to measure indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafaela. I just wanted to maybe add on to that. So having worked with authors and publishers, at both ends, I think, being able to, like I mentioned, being able to spot that research and, highlighting that, not just in terms of writing the narrative well, but also highlighting the logic and the impact, so you could, like previously, editors focus more on the language and things of that sort. But it's not just about making it sound pretty or nice, but it's about, hey, getting to the point, driving home to be like, this is the research and this is the impact it could potentially have. And perhaps it doesn't necessarily always have to be application based. It could also be theoretical research, but it's very important to showcase that this is the value, right? And for a lot of times, authors know that. They know that when they've done their research, but they just don't know how to communicate it. And I think that's where editors have to come in. It's not just about, hey, you've got a document, you work on what you have. No, ask more questions, think like the publisher and be like, hey, these are the questions, right? We're all subject matter experts. So I think in this, evolving world, I think leveling up our human expertise is actually what's going to be very, very important, because that's also the same questions the publishers are going to ask, like, why should I care about this document? That sort of thing. So logic and, that highlighting that impact is important. I think also focusing on the interpretations. So a lot of times when people write their documents, they tend to be very descriptive. Okay, and especially now with the use of AI, when authors tend to write, they tend to describe things more than actually share their interpretations. And that also ties into the impact, So asking those meaningful questions as an editor is now all the more crucial. And I think it's very important. I think what publishers also look at is that in addition to the impact, and like I mentioned, integrity, is that you comply with their requirements, So say, for example, reporting guidelines, especially in medical papers, the research obviously would have complied with that, but you need to be able to document that. Okay, so it's not just about talking about the big findings, but it's also about the nitty-gritty details, so that people feel confident that your impact and the results that you have are grounded in actual facts, and that they can possibly be reproduced, etc. So making sure your reporting is very well documented, your ethics statements, your disclosures, it might seem very tedious, and oftentimes people miss those things, but I know for a fact that, it stops the workflow. Once you submit it, publishers might come back to you and be like, hey, all of this is missing. So then you have to redo it anyways. So you might as well do it at the start. And as editors, it's important that if authors don't have, the wherewithal or the ability to understand fully the complex environment, it's your job to just, okay, this is what is required. This is what this means. So this is what you need to include in your document, because it might not seem as important as, say, when you describe your results, etc., but it is ultimately critical. And that's what publishers are also looking at, that you have complied with the requirements that they have for integrity, for ethical statements, everything. So I think just to add to that,
Yeah. So I'm just
You know,
wondering, have the Sorry, Yatindra.
Yeah, I was thinking I will take up Susanna on 2 points. She mentioned structuring and interpretation. And if we are going to use tools, we are on a very dangerous ground. Because a very interesting example that I remember, it was an article, in fact, contributed by those who developed AI. And they tested AI with a simple question: how many D's there are in DeepSeek? It's a very simple question. How many D's? We know it's only one, but the answers range from 3 to 6. So you see, what we need to understand is that AI has no understanding. So if we are going to ask AI to interpret and structure our content, we need to be really, really very careful.
It also makes me wonder if, so while we are speaking about this from the editor perspective, right? From the author, from the client perspective, those who are coming to us with editing jobs have their expectations changed, or are they asking different questions today than they were maybe 2 years ago? What evolution have we seen when it comes to that? Yatindra, Susanna, if there's any insights you have here.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take it up first. Yes, I think previously the requests we got were, help me polish my manuscript so that it's submission ready. But I think now with AI, etc., there's a lot more fear, I would say, and a lot like because I think not everybody fully understands what the policies are. The journal guidelines themselves are quite complex, right? And I think one thing is very clear is that AI cannot be an author. But then sometimes authors tend to use AI to translate certain things. But then sometimes these translation tools run the risk of plagiarizing unintentionally, right? Because we don't know how the AI tool has been developed, trained, etc., and all of that. Likewise, sometimes people do it just to sort of trim it, like, hey, just make sure there are no grammatical issues. It's a simple ask, but then they don't know, okay, is this good enough to submit to the journal? And so sometimes we tend to get requests of, can you humanize my manuscript? Okay, and that has very heavy ethical implications. So when people come to us with requests, like when authors come to us, we have to educate authors to be like, look, humanization to avoid AI detection is unethical, because you need to ensure that you've not plagiarized context. You have to take accountability for everything that has been mentioned there. It's not a simple thing as, okay, we just remove all AI elements, etc. But I think where, like I mentioned, being advisors, I think that's where now we, not just the expectations of the authors, but I think expectations of ourselves as editors has changed. We need to be able to guide authors to tell them this is how you should approach these things ethically. But I think just to answer your question, I think the requests now are more about just how do I navigate the journal guidelines, the AI policies and all of these things. It's not as of much as about, hey, can you help improve my manuscript? Because a lot of authors have already used AI to sort of perhaps improve their language. And while we know as editors that perhaps that's not, AI is not the holy grail, but that perception is there among authors that perhaps I don't need language support, but I need support for everything else that I don't fully understand. So I think, yeah, just that.
And Ruhi, you mentioned about the kind of demands or the requirements that the authors
Right.
have. For instance, now a few years ago, it was quite straightforward that because authors had probably lifted text word for word, and the similarity index was high. So the authors would say, look, I'm sorry, but the similarity index is very high. Please lower it. That was one of the tasks that was asked of an editor. And where your language skills are important because you need to paraphrase it. But increasingly, as Susanna mentioned, this humanizing thing, that really, I find it very strange because the authors have probably used AI to generate text, which is, of course, a terrible thing to do. So they have used a non-human approach to generating text, and editors are asked to humanize it. Even more interesting, even if I do humanize it, somebody else is going to judge whether in fact it is human written, and that judgment is going to be based on another tool. So how does it work? Now, in fact, this morning I saw somebody had posted a picture of handwritten copy, and this was an effort to prove to the powers that be that this was the editor's original post because it was handwritten. So my question was, well, one can generate AI text, copy it from screen in longhand. How does that help? Which means that element of trust, I think that is important, because we need to really watch where we are going. Earlier, AI was used only to take care of spelling, grammar, and consistency. That's fine. To take care of formatting of references, okay, that's fine. Then AI started to be using to generate text, and reviewers started using AI to review the text. So, where are we going really?
Right. In fact, since we're on the subject of how the editorial labor is being redefined today and at so many different levels, my next question is for Rafaela. Like, are editors? Do you think the editors are at risk today if they continue positioning themselves as just language correctors?
That's a very pertinent question. So, in my opinion, AI is not eliminating editorial labor, let's say like this, but it will indeed redefine the role of the editors much beyond the language correction. So it forces to reconsider what is the editorial value. So if we think the editorial work, right? So it combines many different functions, and the AI can automate some of those functions, some of those tasks, but it does not explicitly and only and merely accelerate the editorial workflow. It redistributes the value that then is created because editorial activities require contextual judgment. It requires intellectual synthesis. It requires to manage what is uncertain and unknown yet, or which is the ethical reasoning behind the manuscript, which is the scientific insights that amplify all the rest of this work. So in my opinion, AI shift the distinction between two kind of editors. So the editor that position themselves just primarily improving how science is written, but then there is the need to emphasize the figure of what is the intellectual model of editor, where editor indeed shapes science, how this is evaluated, and how is indeed trusted, as it was said before. So it's not AI does not simply promote a technological replacement, let's say like this, of many tasks, but indeed it positions strategically the journal and the editor as more curators of science and of the evidence and facilitators of this dissemination.
So actually, that you make a very interesting point, especially when you say facilitates the curation of science. So I'm just wondering, when you think about the current AI conversation, is there anything today that concerns you, or anything today that makes you feel really happy, or that you feel assured, like reassured, or concerning? Either of the two is. What is your view on that?
So it's not concerning the technological part, right? Because all the scientific process of publishing has always evolved from a technological point of view. If we think about the printed journals that were before, right, or the references that we were putting by hand. So that is not to me concerning. But what is really, my opinion, more worrisome is the narrative that is just focusing on the speed, the scale, the automation, the productivity, how to improve efficiency in that way, right? So how we can do it faster. But there is not much conversation on how we can do it better. And that is indeed what to me, the conversation regarding AI need indeed to focus, right? So can we indeed promote the use of AI to disseminate better science and not faster science that then might create indeed, a lot of knowledge that is not trusted by the scientific community.
Wow, that's a beautiful thought. I can see Susanna would like to add to that. So,
Yeah. I think Rafaela has summarized the thing, right? Is that just because you can or doesn't mean you should actually use AI. And while she's mentioned, how do we use AI to do it better? That's a big concern. I also have the concern about copyright, people and security, data security, because if you're using AI, you're uploading data sets, etc. You don't know how that is stored, right? So especially if you're using a free account for several of these tools, because that's what most people tend to use, because that's what is so readily available. You don't know where this information is being stored, how it's going to be used. So, and that fear that you have of confidentiality and, all of that it just worsens now. And I think, I think recently, what was that? There was a tool that decided to say, hey, you can mimic your favorite researcher or author, and they'll, use a tool to write it in that fashion. And it may not, it makes sense from a technological point. Oh my God, that's great from a technology point of view. But when it comes to actual academic integrity and when it comes to copyright, that is a complete no-no. So I think for me, that concern is also there about the ethical use of AI. No one's saying don't use it. It's great strides in technology, but I think how to use it ethically and without compromising on data security, I think for me, that's also a very big concern.
you make a good point. In fact, since we're on the topic of ethics, my next question would be to Yatendra. I can see his hand up already. So let me just ask my question, and Yatendra, you can respond to Susanna as well as take on the next query, which is about the recent case that we saw published in the Lancet, which found a sharp rise in fabricated AI generated references that were making their way into published biomedical papers. And I think what struck many people was that these papers often appeared polished and credible on the surface, and as manuscript editors, are we now moving from improving language and clarity to actually becoming the critical safeguards for research integrity itself? And what responsibilities do editors now carry, in protecting research integrity?
Yeah, in fact, you raised this point about fabricated citations. I would still say fabricated or fake citations, because I think hallucination is simply a euphemism. See for what it is. Now, that raises an interesting query, because when tools like Reference Manager and EndNote came along, the authors were very happy, because there was this tool that could take care of the mechanical chore of formatting references exactly in the way the journals want them. So that freed authors of this drudgery. But now with AI has gone one step ahead. It is not only ensuring that the reference formatting correct, but it is fabricating references. It is introducing references that don't exist. And it does it in a very sophisticated manner, because you see, even these fabricated references get the co-authors right, get the journals right. So it is pretty well done job. So then the question to me is, earlier as manuscript editors, we would say that, well, so long as the bibliographic elements are not missing, there is no question of double checking that. We would take the author's word for them. But now we have this case of fabricated references, which is vitiating the entire superstructure of scholarly publishing. In fact, Archive has responded to this concern by saying that if it finds any evidence of faked references, it will ban the author from posting on Archive for 1 year. So this is something that we really need to address, that what was a convenient tool is now becoming a dangerous tool.
Right. And actually, since you spoke about fabricated references, I'm also wondering about, we are also seeing, like, increasingly seeing concerns around AI manipulated research images and figures, from subtle enhancements to entirely fabricated visuals that can be very hard or difficult to detect. And I'm just wondering, Rafaela, from your perspective, how is this changing the research integrity landscape and our current editorial and publishing workflows, according to you, prepared for this challenge?
Indeed, this is a major concern for publishers, because it goes much beyond the detection of, let's say, misconduct or scientific non-compliance towards the integrity standards. Because the question that poses is, what happens if then those evidence on which science is built, because we need to say that figures and images are representing the data of a scientific paper. But what happens if those are then becoming increasingly difficult to authenticate? And this is what is a major topic in the industry. Because it has multiple implications, because including, if we think, for instance, the publishing workflow, so it goes from receiving manuscript to peer reviewer, editorial oversight, and then until then authors can reply, right? And then there is another screening. But the use of AI in that direction, so it allows also the journal to really rethink completely this workflow, because is the peer reviewer system designed nowadays to really evaluate those fabricated data? The answer is no. And how, therefore, can the journal, not simply rely on a post-submission detection of data fabrication, but it can indeed improve this transparency much upstream, right? So it's something that is indeed concerning, and the potential responses around that is to really make available raw data, to really show the images, raw images, or to allow traceability and reproducibility of those data. So, which means also to entail responsibility to everybody. And this is why the question is not related only to a technological issue, but a governance one. Because then how institution can indeed redesign their verification system internally to provide the transparency that the scientific journal might need then.
Right. Since you spoke about, institutions and what they need to do to redesign it, my next question is for Susanna. So how do you think, Susanna, publishers and editorial service providers are navigating, quality assurance in AI assisted editing, and could over reliance on AI create new risks for publishers?
Okay. Thanks, Rahi. So I want to be very clear that a lot of the integrity issues that we're discussing, they don't come just because of AI. They always existed. It's just that they've gotten worse. The quantity, the volume of these issues have increased. So you always had paper mill activity, reference padding, so fabricated references is not specific to AI. There were fabricated references even before that. What happens now with the use of AI is that you have more such instances, okay? And that may come about maybe intentionally, but it could also be unintentionally. Like, hey, someone's decided, I can't sit and format my reference list, so let me put it in AI and let them format my reference list. And that's unintentional, okay? So no one's... So too, where I said, hey, format the references in the Chicago Manual of Style, okay? And there was this one author that had, the first author was Shah, J, okay? The actual name was meant to be John, okay? But the AI was like, oh, let's look at the number of people, all the Shahs in the Chicago metropolitan area, see how many of them are J Shah, and then give the first name as Jay, like Jay, Jay Shah, because geographically that's the most common first name for a person which the surname Shah in the Chicago area, right? So like we mentioned, AI cannot interpret and there will be issues. So I would just want to be very, very clear that, if someone uses AI, etc., it is not to say that there's a black mark. And that's also what publishers are aware of. So I think when a lot of authors come to us to be like, hey, my AI detection score is that high, we have to tell them, it's not about whether your score is X or Y, because there's no gold standard tool. It's about how you've used AI, how you're declaring your use of AI. So when publishers do look, so they obviously have always had checks, right? Their workflow, pre-acceptance, then maybe post-peer review, and then even post-acceptance, etc. I think someone on the group chat also mentioned now there's a new career about just checking integrity issues at every stage, even post publication when there are allegations, etc. But I think and a lot of publishers also have their own tools, for AI detection, etc. So like I said, no gold standard. But what I think is going to be very, very important is that there should be expertise in the loop, human expertise in the loop. You can't catch AI issues with another AI, right? It's not going to this. So yes, it might speed things up, efficiency, but there has to be human in the loop. So I think, and when there are, say, for example, the report flags something, like let's say you have an automated report, it's important that the expert validates to be like, is this actually valid or not? And I think a lot of publishers have realized that. I think Springer Nature has spoken about, there are tools like Geppetto and, a lot of other tools that they have. So I think it's important that there's always a human validation, and it's not that. So I think publishers have done that. In terms of risks, like I said, it's just worsening of the issues. So I think the risk for publishers is the increasing cost, because you have more ethical issues. So you have more checks to do, more validation, and also if the paper does get published, it's a lot more allegations to also check if it gets flagged. So there's also an increasing cost. So I think for publishers, that would probably be the biggest risk in terms of how have they allocated like their costs and investments for integrity. I think more so, because that will go hand in hand with AI.
Right, right. In fact, we always also talk about the author voice, right, and preserving the author voice when we are editing. But given that now large chunks of the manuscript may be written by AI, then what happens to the author voice? So Yatendra, this if you can talk a little bit about this, aside from the fact that are we today training editors for the future or for the past, and what skills should the next generation of manuscript editors prioritize? Because at some point it used to be about preserving the author voice, and does that still hold, or are the skills itself that editors require today changing because of such changes that are happening in the background? So just wanted your thoughts on that.
This thing about author's voice, one thing I should mention is that I have seen that this is far more important if it comes to manuscripts in social sciences and humanities. In physical and biological sciences, I think the author's main concern is that their paper is accepted. They are not really particular about their voice being preserved. But even more important, now let's say that as an editor, I should respect the author's voice. I should impose my own way of phrasing on that. But then, if the text itself has been generated using AI, where's the author's voice? So, are we preserving the AI's voice? So, are we in fact making the text more generic than it needs to be? Because if authors are going to use AI to generate their text, there is no voice to be preserved. That, in fact, makes probably the editor's job easier. But you also asked about training the editors for future. I would say that in this case, the skill that is going to be increasingly demanded of manuscript editors is to make the manuscript sound as though it was not AI generated. Now, how do I do that? One interesting bit of information I came across recently is that what AI expects, a measure what it calls perplexity. That is, now AI is simply statistics. So based on, let's say, 8 preceding words, what is the most likely ninth word? Now, if you use a word that is not likely to be, that statistically shouldn't be there, you are perplexing the AI, which means it is taking it as a sign of human generated text. Now, how do you do that? You can only do that if you are quite proficient in language, and most important, if you are very well read. Because after all, in fact, this was one of the remarks that I still remember posed to me by an editor in Cactus. She said that, look, if all that we read is manuscripts that need to be improved, how do we improve our own language? Which means we need to read not just work that comes our way, but we need to read widely. We need to read authors that write well, because finally that is what going to help you in making your text sound human. And that's a pretty time consuming job. Because in fact, I am with Rafila. She keeps saying that, we must slow down. This speed at any cost is really a problem. Because in order to prioritize speed, authors are in fact then don't take the trouble to digest what they read, because they would simply retrieve references using a tool and use another tool to summarize those references. So where is the understanding? So this is a trend that we need to watch out for, and we need to train editors that they need to write well. It's an old skill, but it's not going to go away.
Right. I think that you make a very interesting point, and that we often also speak about AI being a threat, right? AI being a threat for so many jobs or for different stages of publication. So, instead of focusing on the threat part of it, Rafaela, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what are the opportunities does AI create for editors rather than threaten?
Yeah, so indeed, this is trying to change the narrative, right? Rather than focusing on the automation that AI creates of the different tasks and the replacement of many jobs. We needed to see that the AI indeed can also allow the editors to really allocate less time on those tasks that are very repetitive and very technical, because AI can do that, while editors can really focus on what is indeed the science that is beyond the message conveyed by the authors, which is the contextualization within the scientific field, which is the strategic thinking they are trying indeed to make. So, and author can indeed provide the way within their manuscript for editor to be indeed more focused on the scientific aspects and the data reproducibility, the quality, the communication that authors want to promote. because indeed, this is what I think. In my opinion, the challenge is not to change the narrative by saying how much editors are indeed using AI, but is how editor can use AI to redefine which are indeed their competences, which is the scientific identity of editorial membership, right? And how indeed we can use AI to change also how the editorial work is perceived. That, as I said before, goes much more beyond the language correction or all those technicalities that AI can indeed do.
So, in the same vein, I remember when we last met, you were also talking about, instead of focusing on the risks, for researchers in the global south, AI might actually also represent access, to language support, to publishing guidance, to research discovery, learning tools, things that they maybe previously found difficult or expensive to obtain. Do you think that in this case, then AI is actually becoming a bridge rather than a barrier, and in what way?
Yeah, so this is indeed what we all hope, right? So that the AI can democratize the access to different capabilities and competencies and knowledge that was before concentrated in institutions or countries with advanced economy or institutions that are very well equipped, right? So AI can indeed provide the language support to reduce the disadvantage that are usually associated with the publishing, because there is not that people are not mastering very well English. But they can also, AI can also indeed provide the tool to perform a better research discovery that then accelerate even the educational system in terms of quality, because you can have an automated mentor, let's call it like this, and more learning opportunities that are based, if we think about virtual courses, right? Or the assistance at broad level that the researcher can do. However, it might also, and this is what we are all afraid of, that it might also enhance the inequity. Because indeed, if, let's say, the AI remains concentrated in a high-performing institution or system that are then economically inaccessible by the global south, that it's a problem, the same way that most of the models nowadays on AI are based on extrapolated data from the global south, not generated there. And these might indeed, promote some enhancing inequities if the governance framework is not really developed to enhance the participation of middle and low income countries. So it's not actually, the conversation should be the opportunity is not simply to democratize the tool, but also to really allow the participation in knowledge production, because AI, what cannot do is to promote investments, right? So investments in infrastructure, in softwares, in institutions, these are the countries that need indeed to provide for it. So AI can be a tool. Let's see how then it will be assessed in the global south.
So, actually, just with about 10 minutes to go to the end of the session, I just want to remind participants to please share your questions in chat if you have any. We have one final question, and then we will take questions from the audience. This question actually goes to all the three panelists. Given that we've discussed what impact actually means in manuscript editing. We've spoken about the redefinition of editorial labor. We've spoken about trust, integrity, responsibility, and the future role of the manuscript editor. But let's let's also discuss, measuring human value beyond just efficiency, which is, what we say AI brings into the system. But when organizations, like, say, prioritize scale or speed or cost efficiency, or if authors are prioritizing scale, speed, cost efficiency, then how do you build a case that human editorial expertise is still essential to publishing quality and trust? And how do you convince stakeholders to invest in human expertise when AI promises scale and AI promises cost reduction? So this is open for all panelists to take.
I'll go first. Back in 1981, when MTV first launched, it launched at midnight with a video called, I think, Video Kills the Radio Star, because up until that point, you heard your music through radios. But we still have radios now. People still listen to music. People just don't watch MTV for music. So I think based on that, I think we shouldn't worry that AI is going to kill academic editing. It's just a case of remixing our skills, highlighting our expertise, because our attention to detail, our ability, our scientific temperament, I think that's where the value comes in. Because no company, even if they do decide, hey, let's get AI to improve efficiency, scale, etc., or even authors, they still want human validation. Like I said, the biggest question we get from authors is, am I doing things correctly? They still want guidance. So people still want the human in the loop, just in a different form. They don't necessarily want you to just do the language. They want you to guide them, want you to make sure that you are providing that scientific expertise, your attention to detail, all the other expertise and skills that you have as an editor, which perhaps weren't previously highlighted. So I think, I think we should just embrace that. It's a time for remixing and upskilling rather than, hey, it's dead in the water, like traditional editing. So yeah.
I think it also depends on the whole scholarly publication ecosystem and how it is assessed. Because so long as that is metrics driven, if authors are going to be judged by the impact factor of the journal in which they publish, then it will be very difficult to introduce non-metric approach at any of the operation. So when it comes to judging the manuscript editor's performance or efficiency, I would say the simple yardstick should be the proportion of papers that are accepted or the proportion of papers that are processed faster because of the careful work by the manuscript editor. Because if the emphasis is on metrics, if the emphasis is on speed, then it will be hard to use AI widely. For instance, now authors ideally should use AI to polish language. I understand that, but not to generate text. Because then that understanding that we expect the authors to have based on the research they have conducted firsthand, that will not seep through the draft that AI comes up with. So which means authors need to be told how to use AI. In fact, an article I read recently made this point that after all, who is promoting the AI? It's industry. But the aims of industry are very different from the aims of science. And until we have that understanding and until publishers insist that authors share that understanding, it's going to be anybody's guess how things will unfold.
And continuing on the same line, so if we think about the added value, right? So the speed is not an added value for a journal. Things can be done fast, but in a very bad manner. So in order to be credible, the journal needs to publish something that is really scientifically very well founded, the knowledge is out there. So it means that there are other values that can indeed be prioritized while indeed we have those automated systems. And that is the judgment, the scientific judgment. So editor, most probably in the future would need to be much more knowledgeable about the science that they are allowing to be disseminated versus what they are now. They might need to, provide competence, very high competence on ethical reasoning even, or in how they can interpret the entire context of the scientific field, because this is what then will allow to reframe these, as I said, this narrative on AI, but to reduce the skepticism on using this tool while improving the scientific quality of indeed the community that the manuscripts allow to build around the field. And this is my way, let's say like this, to convince stakeholders that indeed the knowledge cannot be replaced, because that AI tools are trying to indeed promote the knowledge that is already discovered or was already discovered. So they are not replacing that. And that I think that is a very strong case. Thank you.
Wow, these are some great insights. We also have a question that's come in. I'm just going to read out the question, and I think again anyone can respond. Should AI generated content be treated differently from human written content during peer review? How can editors distinguish between legitimate AI assisted writing and academic misconduct?
Okay, so yeah, I don't think it's possible to distinguish between the two just because of how integrated AI is into people's workflows. But I think, like I said, it's not you need new skills. It's just about the scientific temperament. Whatever, as editors, as authors, etc., you have that. You just have to focus on that. So ask us questions. Does this make sense? Is this scientifically accurate? It's the same set of questions you need to ask. So even as a peer reviewer, those are the same questions you need to ask. If, say, for example, someone has cited like a lot of like I said, the ethical issues always were there. They've just gotten worse in terms of volume, etc. So I think peer review, nothing changes there. And sorry, what was the second part of the question? How can editors distinguish between legitimate AI assisted writing? Yes, I think that's that onus also on the authors themselves to declare how they've used AI. Sometimes the misconduct comes just because of ignorance. I think, like Yatin mentioned, we're not educating people how to use AI well, right? So it sometimes can just be ignorance. It is difficult because, like I said, there's no gold standard in terms of AI detection. But I think basic editorial skills, scientific checks, logic checks, asking the right questions is how you would be able to figure out, okay, fine, has this been used correctly, etc. Sometimes it could just be not misconduct, but just ignorance, which has resulted in an error.
Ruhi, in fact, I would like to counter your question with another question. You asked, how should editors distinguish between AI-generated text and human-generated text? My question is, why does it need to be distinguished? Because in science publishing, we are focusing on the contents, we are focusing on the soundness of research. The words in which this is clothed and how they were arrived at is not really particularly important.
Wow, yes, that's a great point you make, that it is the actual science that is important and not the way in which it is communicated. I think
With
that's
creative writing, I can understand, but
right.
not with science. He's focusing on the substance, focusing on the contents.
Right. Oh, that's a very lovely way to look at it, I would say. There is one last a question that we have time for. We just have exactly 2 minutes, but since there is one question, I don't want to leave it unanswered. Are there AI-based tools that are currently being successfully used within the editorial landscape?
Sorry, what was that? Would you just repeat the question?
Are there AI-based tools that are currently being successfully used within the editorial landscape?
Yeah, so a lot of tools are used for integrity checks. So like your pre-flight, your paper pal, etc. But in terms of generic ones also, Claude tends to work very well because it has PubMed connectors. So Claude particularly tends to focus a little more on research, etc. But it is not to say that there's a gold standard in terms of the AI tools, but I do know from anecdotal feedback and having used it myself, Claude, PaperPal, Preflight, etc. are some of the tools that you could consider exploring.
Okay, I think that reaches the end of this session. Thank you very, very much to all the panelists. I think this was a very exciting session for me. I learned a lot, I know, and I hope the audience did too. I would also like to thank Mary, who was instrumental in helping set this and make this happen, and Ashley, who had kindly agreed. She's the chair for the Manuscript Editors Role Group, and she had kindly agreed to help us monitor the chat and help us with the Q&A portion. So thank you very much, Mary and Ashley. And with this, it's over to Mary.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining our Manuscript Editors group today. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up with the next part of the program. So our main symposium starts tomorrow, 2nd of June. We open, for those of you that are registered for the entire event, we're open at 9:30 with some opening remarks from our president, and then we will have the announcement and the presentation of our poster competition. So announcement of the winners and their presentations. And then tomorrow we have 3 sessions, one at 10, which follows straight on from the poster awards with Baha herself, our president. Then our peer review committee will have their session at 12 over the sort of lunchtime period, the quality of AI peer review reports. And then in the afternoon, Jason will be with us to look at understanding metrics and what they mean and how to use them. And then tomorrow evening, we have our social event running from 7 o'clock, all these times, UK times. So if you're not registered, registration is closing at 4 o'clock. So please crack on and get yourself registered. If you are, then you will have already had your links, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Why do editors love Scholastica's peer review system?
What sets Scholastica apart from other journal management systems is its remarkable ease of use. I appreciate the intuitive interface. Glenn A. Bowen, Section Editor, International Journal of Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement.
Scholastica has made my editorial tasks a breeze. Both manuscript referees and authors have commented on the outstanding platform. Nandita Mitra, Editor-in-Chief, Observational Studies.
Moving to Scholastica has dramatically reduced our time to decision on submitted manuscripts and time to publication of accepted manuscripts. Joshua C. Hall, Editor, Journal of Regional Analysis and Policy.
An intuitive platform with the features you need, like built-in email to streamline communication, powerful submission filters, seamless manuscript transfers, easy configuration and integration options, and more. Ready to learn more? Visit scholasticahq.com.